help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And I am joined today in our studio in College Station, Texas, by Steve Carlin from Wisconsin. Steve, how are you?
Hey, glad to be here as always. How are you, Sean?
Good. I know it's freezing in here.
I am never colder than when I am indoors in Texas.
Which is saying something because you live in Wisconsin. Also, Heather Gardner, how
Howdy.
are you?
I'm great. I'm very blessed.
A faithful podcast listener turned into frequent co-host. How is that?
It's weird. Actually, there's something I've always wanted to do, which is really funny.
That's not what I thought you were going to say. It is my great honor to serve those who listen to this.
It is really fantastic to be here with you guys today, Sean and Steve.
Thank you. Is that hard?
No.
Looks like a hostage video.
That's right. Can't blink twice.
Okay, but for all those who are like me and they listen to this podcast and almost every single other podcast on 1.5 or 1.75 speed. Hi, how are you doing today? It's great to talk to you. Ooh, I just rocked your world.
What are you trying to say here? You're trying to get the podcast experience over with?
Yeah, basically.
I don't believe that.
I got things to do. I got to make it go faster.
I want people to email us at podcast@40daysforlife.com and put in if you listen to it at fast speed. Because some of my podcasts, I only listen to maybe 3 podcasts regularly. And one of them is brutally slow, like unbelievably slow. And they've been doing it a long time, and like they should be way better than every other podcast, but it's awful. But I like the content, so I won't name it because it's not fair. But they're on like as fast as I can get them, and it still sounds normal.
Oh, wow.
It's that bad.
Oh, wow.
It's that bad. But for us, I'm interested how many people actually do that, because you mentioned it. I think it determines how many podcasts you listen to. Because I don't listen to a whole lot, so I don't.
If I want to get through more of them, I have to listen to them faster. The only one, well, there's 2, and one of them is Father Mike Schmitz. He talks way too fast in normal speed to speed him up. You can't understand what he's saying if you speed him up. So
he's normal rate in your phone, but everybody else, you speed us up.
Oh yeah. The music is like.
I'm deeply and gravely offended. Here's what I do. So when we send out the emails, you send out the email, Sean, I capture the little screenshot so we can put the little play button on and click here to watch the video. Sometimes to make sure I don't get any blur, I'll put it on half speed until I can like find the exact right screenshot that I want to grab.
Then they sound drunk.
We sound like we're drunk. Like, welcome to the 40 days.
It's actually
for life.
entertaining to do that on a podcast.
And you're
I'm
my
going to try
best
that.
friend.
I've never.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. But that's what, when I see you guys in person, I'm like, what, are you guys like drunk or something? Why are you talking so slow? Because I'm used to listening to you talk fast. No.
So fast. Okay, that's interesting. I've never heard that. So email us if you listen to it on. So people can't complain if the podcast is too long because they're flying through it.
No, they can't complain because they can always skip, the first 5-10 minutes, whatever, or they can listen to it faster. Yeah.
Plus, who would be down about more excellent content?
The
Good
banter
point.
is what we get the most compliments on.
Yeah.
Which is not, maybe that's a negative reflection of this podcast.
I
But
think the more correct way to say it is comments on. A lot of them are compliments. Some of them are not.
nobody would know what the Thunder Ducks are if we didn't do banter.
I'm not saying they're wrong.
Steve's
I'm just
wiffle
saying-
ball career,
Yeah.
which obviously means nothing to
Yeah.
people like you.
True.
It's We'd be depriving Steve's lack of movie knowledge and how pathetic he is. Nobody would have any idea of that.
I will point out to the listeners that it wasn't but a few weeks ago, I think, that Sean said that the negative comments are ignored. So even if there are negative comments about the banter, you ignore them.
We take them into account.
You take them into account, okay.
But they can be ignored.
Sure.
But they're appreciated.
Sure.
So send the negative comments.
Yeah.
For the record, just to check in on this, have you seen Shawshank Redemption yet?
No.
Do you intend on seeing it?
I do. It's just really long. By the time the kids
Put it on
who
1.5
shouldn't-
speed.
That's an idea.
Don't do
By
that.
the time the kids who shouldn't be up for it, which maybe is all of them, I don't know. Haven't seen it, so I can't say. But by the time the kids are to bed, I don't have 2.5 hours. If it was an hour 45, I would have seen it 3 times by now, but I can't stay up that late.
It's not a kid movie. What about A Few Good Men? That's like an hour and 45.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I didn't know. Okay, anyways.
Now he knows.
That's just one of the many things. We just haven't met a lot of people that haven't seen Shawshank. Have you seen it?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I know. It's on my list too.
All right, let's just get into this. Forget y'all.
Good night, Steve.
Unbelievable. Sorry to Andy Dufresne for all your efforts. There you go. Unappreciated by most of the people that are with me today. All right. 100. Here's the topic, by the way. 180.
No, 180.
180. A 180. It's a good documentary back in the day. Angry abortion supporters who experienced a change of heart. This is actually a very uplifting podcast, which we need heading into the fall. This is great, and this happens because the listener, the viewer, they hear the media, you see all these clips. This is why TikTok is so awful, and all that. Just the world's going crazy. This guy on the street is telling an old lady "F you," and it's all this conflict. Everybody's angry. What they don't see is angry people who change their mind because somebody doesn't respond in anger, and it happens to us all the time.
It does, and nobody ever expects it. I think sometimes there's that idea of like, wait, what I had to say and the way that I said it actually worked. Like we almost don't believe our prayers are going to be effective or our peaceful Christ-like demeanor. But it's so critical to recall that it happens all the time. And most of the time we're planting seeds and we're not around to see those seeds sprout and blossom and flower. Just we entrust it to the Lord. We have the conversations, we entrust the rest to the Lord. But there are all of these cases where right on the spot, somebody changes their mind about being angry or even changes their mind about abortion altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. We're going to get into some specifics and share some stories on people that basically went from just crazy Looney Tunes. But before that, to being nice, before that, I think that this is important. So I don't know if you remember a few years ago, I said that the ProLife Movement is a religious movement, essentially, and that's a good thing.
We did a whole podcast on it.
Yes, and there were some, I guess, well-intended secularists that said, I wanted to throw them out of the movement. It was like this overblown drama thing. And I was like, no, I don't, whatever. But the reality is if you go, it's a big tent. It's easy to be pro-life intellectually. An 8-year-old can do it. You don't have to believe in Jesus or God or Tom Cruise or Oprah or Buddha or anybody. But I knew that'd get you. He's seen that. He's seen that movie. But that's a very simple stance, right, based on science. What the religious part comes in is science can't explain why someone would want to kill an innocent person. It can't explain the evil. It can't explain leaving a baby girl on the table to die when you fail to abort her successfully and kill her. And that is what makes it a spiritual battle. And I think our disposition has to be, there's also a practical sense that you go to the March for Life, you go to the Dobbs event that we held in D.C., you go to 40 Days for Life, you go to pregnancy centers. Most people are religiously motivated because it is a great evil. That ultimately, abortion is a sin. And for all of us as a society, but certainly those that are directly involved and those who say nothing. And so it has a spiritual element because you can't explain the Nazis. There's a Woody Allen movie where the wife wants them to explain like life to their son. Their son is kind of lost, and they're like, talk to him about life, how the way things are. And he's like, what does that mean? They're like, I don't know. Explain the Nazis to him. He's like, I got to explain the Nazis? I don't know how the can opener works. It's a really funny line. But that's really true, is that you can say life begins at conception, which is great, but you can't explain that which is in us that gives us the will and the desire to kill that person. And that's why we have to start with the disposition of we're not battling against flesh and blood.
Right. Battling with, it's a spiritual battle. So yeah, we're not fighting, while it seems like we can easily make enemies out of, the people that disagree with us, the people that like to give us the number one finger as they're driving by with the wrong finger, or the people that like to curse and shout and throw questionable liquids at us from time to time. Definitely we can't see those folks as the enemy. So
it's always tempting. I know, Sean, you're really gifted in that, like, you have like comebacks that are clever, but they're also charitable and disarming. I can think of some things that are really funny, but they're really mean and not going to help somebody make a 180. And I think I'd
like to hear some of those one day. I'd like to hear your version of mean.
That's the rest of the podcast.
That's right. Rated R.
But sometimes it's so satisfying to gotcha. Like I had the right sort of verbal barb to say. And as clever as that may make me feel or make somebody else feel, as satisfying as it might seem to be, those are never the things that bring folks over to the pro-life side. When that conversion swings one way, it's never like, how did you become pro-life? Well, this guy, he just nailed me on this comeback. It was amazing. I was like on the ground. That's not how it happens. It's got to be in charity, which requires patience. It requires love. It requires all of these virtues that are sometimes tough to put into practice when you've got somebody driving by and flipping you off and telling you to get a life.
And that is the goal of What to Say When, not to have a book plug, but you brought that up. But when we released that, it was like, this is the point of this, and it's in the book, is not to be a know-it-all, like jerk. You will be a know-it-all. And how you use that information is up to you. If you want to be a jerk, if you want to win the argument, if you want to stick it to them, you'll be able to do that. The What to Say When, there's plenty of facts in there. There's plenty of arguments in there but the book is structured that you have to be approachable and that these responses are proven to make people think beyond and then I made a point about zygotes and she converted. That's not the point. The point is that we are able to put up arguments, which we need to do, and make a defense for what we believe, but do so in a way that is inviting. And that's why questions are big and What to Say When. There's nothing wrong with asking questions.
We sort of have this watered down version of Christianity that's become really prevalent, where I think
What do you mean? I think everything's good.
I think the only commandment in it is be nice, which is not one of the 10 commandments. It's not one of the 2 great commandments that the Lord gave us. It's not part of the Mosaic Law. There's no part of our faith that is predicated on be nice. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we need to not be nice. We can, I think, kind of use that overall overarching cultural message for our advantage, because abortion isn't nice. And that's why you don't need the PhD and you don't need to be Christian. You don't need anything to be pro-life. If you're in favor of being nice, there's nothing nice about tearing a child limb from limb.
So one of the most quotable saints who we've quoted before is Saint Jose Maria. And he was so ahead of his time, as most of the saints are, in that we have to go out into the world and every aspect of the world and re-evangelize the world because of the weakness of Christianity. And he's got great quotes like, Jesus Christ took nails into his wrists and died for you. What have you done today? There's these piercing Spaniard, whoa! But in all of his writings, his use of English is very good, especially considering it's not his first language. But he has this phrase where he'll say, are you cheerful? Are you a cheerful person? Are you a generous person? Not just with money, but with your time and with your disposition. Are you generous and cheerful when you don't feel like being? And that's kind of our notion. Are you pleasant to be around? You can be upset about something, but still be pleasant. Like you can pleasantly share it. You don't have to cuss everybody out and kick a chair. And I always liked his use of that because he was not a wimp. He was very strong-willed Spaniard. But he knew you have to be, meek and humble of heart. And you got to be cheerful. And if you don't appear cheerful, how many people have become Christian over the years because they just saw there was something else in this person in my life? All of us have had that. We've had a grandparent or a priest or a pastor or just our neighbor. And you're like, they're just joyful, and that they have crosses, but there's a disposition there. And that's not niceness.
Yeah, joyful doesn't always mean happiness either, too. I think it's how you present yourself. You could be having a really bad day, and then you can choose what to do with the feelings that you have, with the anger you may have. But like if you're in the grocery store and you decide to take that anger out on the cashier, who probably has nothing to do with why you're feeling what you're feeling or what you're going through, you can be kind to that person, and it's not being fake. It's being a nice human. It's being a civil human being, and not letting your emotions take over everything. I think
kindness, which is niceness, but with actual substance in it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Proverbs 15:1 says that a gentle word stirs away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger, which I think is a great example too. This is something I've taught for many years, both to people who are wanting to go outreach on the sidewalk and talk to people and try to get them to go elsewhere, that they have to keep that in mind, that whether it's the client going into the facility or it's an angry passerby, that we have to remember that we can't have that knee-jerk reaction and just allow our feelings to take over, which is really important. So also, side note, EOP, Emergency Operations Plan, says to do just that.
We're going
for 40 Days for Life.
The 40 Days for Life
Remain
Emergency
calm,
Operations
don't
Plan.
respond in kind, respond in love. There you go.
And we don't chase abortion workers down and tell them to repent. They have to approach us. We don't mail them stuff. People are always asking me that. Should I mail my abortionist flowers? Yeah, you want to go to prison because he, put some kind of chemical in there and say you tried to drug them. I mean, you're going to lose that battle every time. Pro-lifers following, reaching out, aggressively going after abortion workers is always a loser. And them coming to us is always a winner. And it means ignoring them and knowing it's a spiritual battle, not an earthly one, and not getting into it with them.
We hear things sometimes like, they'll know we're Christians by our love, right? That's basic. But then there's sometimes
I'm not a fan of that song. It's a great phrase.
There's a song?
Oh, yeah.
They will know. It's almost like a. They will know we are Christians by our love.
Sounds like a.
This is the only time you're ever going to hear me sing on the podcast, unless we have George Strait in one of these chairs one day.
Oh.
But yeah,
Let's do that.
I'm not a fan of the song.
Okay.
But it's a great phrase. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, I'm enlightened.
Is that a Catholic song? Producer John?
No, that's Baptist.
It's okay.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
So we stole
We've
it.
adopted it.
That's why.
We've
Is that why I don't like it? I like Baptist. I don't like the song.
I try not to.
It's not. It's not
my
good
own
enough to be
issue.
Baptist, because I think I have heard that now that you've given us a
I think
beautiful
it's
rendition
universal.
of it.
I think it's a Protestant song or a Baptist song that we stole from them, which is good.
This makes me want to do like the podcast that we can do, which is like the countdown of the top 10 worst Christian songs that you hear at your mass or liturgy.
But I think that there is a top 10. We all love these songs, Catholic or Protestant podcast and list that is up there.
There you go.
So we could do both.
All right.
It's like the 10 books that ruin the world.
That'll gin
and then
up some comments
10
right
books
there.
that'll save the world. It is, because people get iffy about music, and now we've gone on too long. But anyways, I love the phrase. I don't like the song. Now the song's in my head.
I guess my concern with it is sometimes it becomes a cliche, but there is something real about it. And what I can say is, one time I showed up at a 40 Days for Life vigil to speak at the event. The parking was kind of distant. I didn't know where I was going. I was lost. I just got out of the car and I'm like trying to orient myself. And I saw like this small group of young adults. I said, I know those people are like, you could just tell there was an aura about them. There was something attractive about them where like, those people are clearly going to the vigil. I just know that they are. And I tried not to be too creepy, kept like half a block distance and followed them. Sure enough, they were going to the vigil. But all of that is a phenomenon that I think works for the abortion supporters, where they see whatever this thing is about people who love the Lord, a tranquility about them, sort of a radiance in many cases, that is not just effective, but definitely more effective than like, I'm mailing you stuff on the sly.
Mm-hmm. And all the abortion workers, all the men and women going in, they're all human. I think most of them have good but really misguided intentions. They think about things. They know if they told you to go F yourself and you didn't say anything back, and you went and you got your kid and got in the car and moved on about your life. Like they think about those things. Being out in the rain, they know when they treat us like garbage. And those are great opportunities to not respond. And not responding goes so far. So that brings us to our next point, which is, okay, so do we just get pushed over, and when we're being abused, we do nothing?
Yeah, Heather, you mentioned our emergency operations plan, which we provide to all 40 Days for Life leaders in case there's an incident. But we don't go that far where we're allowing ourselves to be abused. And this is the type of thing where every now and then you get the people who, it's rare that there's violence. It's a little less rare that there are threats. And we can't let these things kind of like slide by, because maybe you're out at the vigil. You say, all right, well, I'm willing. I'm going to take one for the team. I'm willing to be martyred for the Lord. And we love the martyrs, but please don't get martyred at a 40 Days for Life vigil. I beg you. But when you make that decision to allow bad behavior when you're out at the vigil, it's going to be perpetuated. You're not just making that decision for yourself. You're making that decision for the family that comes to the vigil after you're done out there. And so this we have mercy, and we have patience, and we have tranquility, but we don't allow it to become misguided in a sense where there's dangerous, illegal, law-breaking behavior, and there's nothing charitable about letting that stuff slide. We get law enforcement involved as necessary and protect ourselves out at the vigil.
Yeah, as we say in the book, keep your cool, don't be a wimp.
Yeah.
Maybe another t-shirt. Okay, let's get into some stories about pro-abortion people that are just enraged. This is a very uplifting topic. I love it because people don't think that it happens.
Got a lot of problems with you people.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Cougar, my son says your company stinks. Okay, so here we go. You start us off.
Okay, so there was a friend of mine a few years back. She's, at the time she was pregnant with her first child, about 15 weeks pregnant. So she's more petite than I am. She was starting to show. Praying, quietly, peacefully. And there were also 2 or 3 Knights of Columbus men that were standing on the sidewalk. But this particular sidewalk had a long stretch of grass. So she was probably, several feet away from the 3 men that were standing, praying together as a group. And there was a passerby, a guy on foot, who walked by and did not like what he saw, did not like that these people were praying outside Planned Parenthood. And he stormed past the 3 men and went right up to my friend, my pregnant friend who was praying quietly, and just kind of towered over her and started yelling and leaning into her. How dare you judge women and sit here and make women feel like this and da-da-da-da. And so she actually just let him rant for a little bit. And when he finally took a breath or pause, I guess she took the opportunity to very sweetly look up at him and say, okay, so would you like for me to tell you the reasons that I'm actually here? And nice. He actually did listen to her. And about 30 minutes later, he ended up shaking her hand and saying, thank you so much for being here. And he apologized for his behavior towards her. And I mean, she could have gotten back in his face, gotten mad at him, responded in anger, and she just, now obviously, again, if you're feeling threatened and you're feeling like someone's about to clobber you or something, you don't feel safe, then get away to a safe place, call the police, that sort of thing. But for this situation, she just calmly responded, and he didn't expect that. And most of them, they don't expect that. So
I'm very positive and optimistic on stuff like this. I don't think he's really getting angry at someone ever again, like letting his emotions get worked up about abortion for sure. But I think anything, Like where he's like, I'm going to go up there and tell the principal of the school or whatever rant he's on.
Yeah.
There's always going to be that one time I did that to that pregnant lady. And that's why I think, like you said, the disposition is so important. Because we all do that. We all walk away from conversations. If we don't think so, then we're liars. We're like, well, I've never said anything I regretted. And then you're just like delusional. But you think about it like, I shouldn't have said it that way. I shouldn't have. This is what's so great about having kids is that you're just like, oh my gosh, I sounded awful. No wonder they were upset. Like, Dad, why are you mad? I'm not. I just want the trash taken out. And you're like, yeah, but you sound mad. I'm not. And then you're like, oh, I did.
I am. I have to do that 10
Take it out
times.
now. Mop
I'm not angry.
as well. Yeah, but that's what that reflection. Everyone has that for the most part. I know there's 1% that are just storming around crazy, but
Sometimes too, if they don't have that reflection, they're with their wife or their husband or their friend who is able to be like, bro.
yeah.
Yeah.
Plus a guy yelling at a woman.
I mean, how empowering and of him to do that.
Doing?
Demonstrating his commitment to women by berating
Yeah.
a petite pregnant woman.
I actually don't like missing an opportunity to point that out if I am that woman in that situation. So
I was at the One Life LA walk one year, and there were a bunch of young men with signs berating the pro-life women about their lack of commitment to women's rights and that they were misogynists. I would have liked to have pointed that out, but I didn't think these fellows seemed like they were up for a thoughtful conversation.
I think your story is next, Steve.
Yeah, so one of the things that I realized, I think early on when I got involved in 40 Days for Life, is a lot of the folks who are the angriest, I think are the angriest because they've been touched personally by abortion at some point in their lives. Maybe directly, maybe a family member, maybe they paid for the abortion and they're trying to justify it. But when we have that cognitive dissonance of we know we did something wrong, and that forces us to confront ourselves, confront our sin, acknowledge our imperfections, that's a hard moment. And you can repent, or you can just lash out at somebody. And we had at our vigil in Madison one time, there was a woman out praying, just peaceful, lovely lady, just wanted to do nothing more than break the cycle of abortion within families. And somebody came up and started giving her the business. And this lady, as she got going, giving our prayer warrior the business, just accelerated her anger. It turned into a rage. Before long, we were thinking this might be a call the police scenario. There's going to be punches thrown. Something bad is about to happen the way it goes. And so our prayer warrior, she just sat there and she just listened to it all. And when the woman kind of surfaced to take a breath, she said, "Honey, I had my abortion in 1972. When did you have yours?" And the woman who had just been screaming at her 2 seconds earlier just collapsed into her arms, sobbing. And I don't really know how that woman's life turned out afterwards. It wasn't my encounter. I didn't have that conversation. I just observed it. But long or short, that was the beginning of a change, a transformation of some sort. Hopefully, I don't know what that looked like right away, but her perception of pro-lifers changed. I think her perception of herself changed. And, to go from there's going to be violence to hugging, that's a pretty radical 180.
Yep.
It's also just getting to the heart of the matter. And that's so important and that doesn't mean every angry person yelling at us is like, well, you probably had an abortion or paid for an abortion, because that I definitely don't recommend saying that. But the reality is often there's a wound there somewhere. And so, no. Well, my favorite version of that is just, it's in Orange, California. Paula, one of our wonderful volunteers, going out. And Paula's young, in her 60s, and she's out praying, and this woman comes up, that orange Planned Parenthood, which I know you've been to, massive abortion facility,
Gigantic.
Big highway, and a lot of saves there. But this woman drives by, and she pulls over and gets out and just storms up to Paula and starts cussing her out. You got some nerve being here. How dare you? How dare you? Planned Parenthood saved my life. I had an abortion there. They saved my life. How dare you? Until you walked in my shoes, you got some nerve being out here and just really just grilling her. And Paula did, thank God, what we train people and hope that they do, which is just take it. Like, take the beating, you know? And the woman just got more belligerent. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. They saved my life. How dare you? And so Paula said, well, how did Planned Parenthood save your life? She said, I was raped as a teenager, and I went in there, and my parents took me, and I had an abortion, and without that day, I never would have been able to have a career. I never would have been able to go to college. I never would have had the life that I have today. You don't know what you're talking about, lady. They saved my life. How dare you be out here? And Paula had a gut feeling and said something I wouldn't encourage anyone to say, which is, they didn't save your life. They killed your baby. And that's a gut feeling when you say something like that, when you kind of deliver the bomb. And the woman just looked at her and said, how dare you be out here? So she walked off and got in her car. And of course, Paula, like all of us, we were just saying, you think, oh my gosh, was that too extreme? Did I just kill this poor woman's soul, you know? And she's just sitting there and she's praying, and the woman came back and she's walking up to her. And so Paula's like, okay, do I apologize for saying that? Do I get ready for a beatdown number 2? Is this going to get violent? And the woman stopped and looked up and just had a different demeanor and said, where were you? To Paula. And Paula said, excuse me? She's like, where were you? Where were you? I was a rape victim, and my parents forced me to have an abortion. And I drive by here every day going to work, and I see you out here, but no one was out here when I had my abortion. Where were you? And Paula, of course, had like tears in her eyes listening to this poor woman, and the woman just started sobbing. And she said, I wasn't here, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here because I didn't get involved until recently, and I'm ashamed of that at my age. And I'm sorry no one else was here, but we're here for you now. And the woman just walked up to her and started hugging and sobbing, and she just kept saying, I was a child. I was a child. And I never forget that, because particularly now with this notion of rape is healed by abortion. And most people think of that and it feels like the compassionate, logical way, and they don't encounter it like we encounter it. They don't encounter the 14-year-old rape victim or 15-year-old rape victim or any rape victim who doesn't abort or who does abort and all of a sudden looks up and is like, I had a car crash, so I crashed my motorcycle also, and it didn't fix the car. And just this whole notion that somehow abortion is designed to heal someone from a rape. And the fact that the lady made the best argument. I was a rape victim. My parents told me to do this, forced me to do it, sounds like. I did it. I went to college. I got a career. Everything my parents said would be ruined wasn't. And it happened. And yet here she is, she was, in her 40s at this point, just sobbing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're given the freedom to acknowledge the reality that they were hurt by it, because everybody in their life in many of these cases is telling them, the parents, the doctors, everyone's saying this is the right thing to do. When the women come forward and say, actually, I regret my abortion, they're swept under the rug. You're no longer are we listening to women. We're throwing them out. We're saying they're extremists. They've found religion or whatever. And so a lot of this is bottled up. And I think our presence sometimes gives women permission to acknowledge what they in their hearts have known all along.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, because it's not even that they're told it's the right thing to do, because you could tell just a girl in college, woman in college, hey, you got your career ahead of you, go have an abortion, it's the right thing. Yeah, I guess so. But that for victims of rape, that it's heroic, that you overcame the rape by having the abortion, and they're sitting here going, I haven't overcome either one. Like, I'm dying inside. And we encounter that all the time. And we also encounter the other side of it, which they really don't want to discuss, which is the rape victims who choose life. Most of them give their baby up for adoption. Very common, especially the teenagers, obviously. And we've worked with them in that. But there's this great hope that, like, you gifted this family with a baby because of your courage. They're true heroes. But nobody wants to hear about that. Nobody wants to hear about a 15-year-old rape victim who chooses life.
We interviewed Paula for Day 41 magazine, and she was effectively run out of her church for choosing life after she was a victim of a brutal environment.
Different Paula than the story.
Yes, a different Paula. I'm sorry. Yeah, different Paula. But effectively run out of her church for choosing life. Your baby's going to be a rapist just like his dad. Your baby's a monster. All of that sort of rhetoric. Just completely nothing empowering about it at all.
No.
Yeah, it's not empowering at all. And that's what, you mentioned One Life LA. I'm talking about Orange, California. And Orange County is like the conservative part of California. It's where Reagan was from. But where Planned Parenthood, Orange is the city is crazy. It's super liberal in California. Angry person gets out yelling about abortion. Hearts and minds are changed and wounded anywhere. And
Austin, Madison.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. There's actually another story recently that happened in Austin. It was this past spring. And shout out to Katrina. She's one of our awesome prayer warriors and staff with the Coalition for Life in Austin. And she was praying, and she called me right after this happened. I remember this very clearly. She'd said there was this angry man that was driving past us at the vigil, and he kept making a U-turn and then driving back around to yell at us again. Like, he did it a few times, just yelling out of his truck.
We support dedicated activists, even though they may not be so.
And I was like, that's inconvenient, because that's an intersection of a freeway,
especially
right
with gas prices.
I
mean, Biden's been horrible for gas,
and Austin's not that great. So for the rest of Texas, but so she says he was he ended up, after the third time, he came over to park at a nearby parking lot, walked over to her angrily, and she was like, I don't know what this man's about to do, but he was walking up kind of with this aggressive demeanor, and she said that he told her he was upset because you guys are judging women. I don't like you being here. You guys are judging women. Why are you here judging women? Which is a common judgment of us. And he said that he had known women who had gone through with getting an abortion and were harassed, and he wanted to know, basically, like, are you here doing the same thing? And so Katrina said, we ended up having a really good conversation. I talked to him. I told him what we were doing. I showed him our brochures with the local resources. I told him some of the things that we tell women. I told him that people that are with us on the sidewalk are women who have had abortions or men who have participated somehow in an abortion in their past, and they've found healing, and they're here now because they don't want to see other people go through this. They want to be there, when someone wasn't there for them during their abortion. And so she said not only did he accept the resources from her, but he wanted multiple copies of the post-abortion healing, because he said he wanted to give them to women he knew who were actually suffering from abortion. So it was like he was very sympathetic towards the women, both because they were harassed. So he had been told, and he didn't say where, they certainly wouldn't have been harassed by us. But women that he said he knew had been harassed and then also had been suffering. And he said he knew a lot of women that actually had suffered, actually were suffering and regretted their abortion. So she said he was very, very hostile in the beginning, and then was very calm and kind towards the end. And she said that one thing that stuck out to her that even, days later she was saying was rolling around in her mind was that he kept saying he has seen how abortion hurts women. She said he said that multiple times in their conversation. And I mean, there you go. That's That's the Holy Spirit right there.
It is, and kudos to him for actually having a 180. But think about that. He knew how badly abortion impacted women, and he was doing all these U-turns and stuff.
Yeah.
And that just shows,
Abortion is built on despair. There's nobody that's going to tell you. I mean, there's the radicals, but 99% of the population will never tell you, yes, abortion is a positive good. It's an actual good. They'll say it's like the least bad situation. And we've really stumbled blindfolded into this strange place in our culture where we're no longer aspiring for good. We're just trying to limit the bad. We were doing workshops training leaders in New York, and the signs aren't like, help keep your friends safe by telling them not to do drugs. It's like good friends take turns and they do drugs one at a time so they can help the other one when they overdose. And
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with abortion. Nobody is going to say like, oh, this is great. We increased the abortion rate 36% last year. Well done, whatever state. It's a built on despair that the things that are good and beautiful and worth striving for are too hard or not possible.
That's why the conversion gate only swings in one direction, which we hammer home a lot, but it's just true. We just don't have pro-life advocates.
It would be the exception, certainly not the rule.
Not the rule, but
Anybody
there's
that did,
tons
yeah.
of workers. There's tons of people that choose life. There's tons of people that are screaming at us and then, don't get it or whatever you want to call it and have a 180. But there's no sidewalk counselor that is like, I finally encountered this woman and she needs an abortion. I mean, I don't think we're 100% right on all this. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
There's no woman running a pregnancy resource center that looks up and says, I should have dedicated my life to running an abortion facility. What am I doing?
Yeah.
This is awful. It doesn't exist. And that is such a powerful thing. It's why we're winning. I mean, at the grassroots, just on hearts and minds, as cliche as that is, that's where we're winning. And that's the most important thing. And these are, of course, examples of that. But it's not a positive. And we've talked about that with the trans movement. Like, it's not, you have to have a positive good that you're affirming. And ours is life is good and therefore should be protected.
Very good.
We were out one time. It was a summer day. We were out praying in Madison where I live. And I think I was praying on my knees on the sidewalk or whatever. And there's this guy parked in the car in the parking lot, stone's throw. You could throw an underhand and hit the guy, or he could hit me. That's how close we were. And he opened his window and he said, go pray about your own sins. And this is where I really would have liked there was a clever comment or two I could have thrown out.
It's a good phrase.
Very sarcastic. And I don't know what I could have done, but I could have said something that would have been rude and would have amped up the situation. And instead, I had, thanks be to God, I had the restraint and I just said, okay, I will. And something about that changed everything. He's launching this conversation. Before long, he's telling me about growing up in poverty, and he, he's seen friends die in his arms. I don't know any of the backstories, but he is a fountain of life tragedies and experiences pouring out on me. I just listened to him. I think it was the most compassionate thing I could do. I think it was a work of mercy in a sense to just hear this guy out. And then he just kind of got back on his initial things well, you're not going to do anything anyway. And I shared with him, well, actually, sir, 40 Days for Life vigils have saved X number of babies. It's oh, well. And one thing led to another, and suddenly he's like, I'm not the father of this child. I'm like, well, why are you here? Well, she needed a friend to bring her here. He's kind of working through it kind of emotionally and talking to me, why he's there, kind of justifying it, but also open to what I have to say. And at a certain point, he kind of accepted, oh, this is a good thing. This is a very good, just like your guy in Austin recognized that women are hurt by abortion. He began to recognize it. And before long, I hear him on the phone, and he's talking to the woman, his friend who had brought for the abortion. He's like, I will raise this child. I will raise this child. I know I'm not the dad, but I'll do it.
Wow.
And she rejected him. And so he's heartbroken. He's crying a little bit. He gets out of his car, and he's wandering the parking lot of Planned Parenthood, effectively sidewalk counseling women who are showing up for their abortion
great.
appointments.
Oh my gosh.
And so you can imagine the security guy at this point doesn't know what to do.
What does he do?
He's not one of us. The security guy is just kind of And so he's going, and I would say this guy was not He had not read What to Say When, and he had not taken our sidewalk outreach training. So his methods were highly questionable.
Okay.
But his heart was in the right place.
Totally.
He's talking to this one woman, and she's giving him the business right back. And like, well, what about these poor kids that are gonna? And he just kind of looks at me like,
Over to you, Steve.
That's gold.
but he was great. It was, we prayed together. I was touched by it. Tragically, the friend who he had brought had the abortion anyway. As they left, he offered her a post-abortion healing brochure that I had given him to give to her. And she peeled out, squealed the tires, and yelled, "Y'all are a-holes, we pray too." So it wasn't a happy ending in that sense. But I was so proud of that man who started out by heckling me, and I think the Lord was pleased with him that day.
That's awesome. Have you seen him since?
No,
I was wondering about that.
no,
Okay.
that's a once in a lifetime. Maybe
Once
on
in
the
a
other
lifetime,
side,
but
God willing.
that I've actually never heard a story like that. And the whole visual, because it's a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life, which I know you actually have seen that movie, great movie. But he's like, I gotta go tell everybody.
Yeah.
And that's what he's doing in the parking lot.
Just wandering around. Like a car comes up, he's walking up by, hey, you don't know about the Women's Care Center across the street?
Yeah. To have that on film. But I've never heard of it, never seen it except for this. So the wandering around like afterwards, because so many people choose life, obviously, and they're great, but they want to get out of there, forget that it ever got that close, forget about the whole day, and just move on with their life. He's running around yelling Merry Christmas at everyone.
Yeah, I have no idea where he went after that. I have no idea where the woman went after that. His tragedy took place that day, but it shows, I think, that there's a real drama on the sidewalks. Sometimes I think it can be easy to be fatalistic on one end or the other. Like, oh, well, they've got the government and they've got big tech and we're never going to be able to overcome it. Or like this sort of like, hey, we overturned Roe and now it's easy sledding. Abortion's going to be done in like a year and then we're surprised when it's not. I think that day to me, as I saw the transformation take place in that man and the efforts that he made, it was a reminder to me that like the things that we do matter. Like abortion isn't this like big thing. It's sort of a composite of individual choices that are made. And that guy made the right choice that day. Did it work out? No, but somebody fought for that baby's life, and that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been open to the conversation that we had.
Yeah. It sounds like he's never the same. I have one that's kind of lighthearted after some of the dramatic ones that we've had, but this just shows we're all human beings, remember this in the scheme of the world. Okay, Jackson, Mississippi, before Dobbs.
We got a lot of good stories from Jackson.
We do. And what people don't believe is that the Jackson, Mississippi pro-abortion folks, way more aggressive than like San Francisco or Seattle. I think it's because it's like, we're stuck here in backwoods Redneckville and we're holding out for progress. And, they're just very aggressive. And of course, there's a million pro-lifers because you got all these like great Baptists and it's awesome. So I'm out there and I'm speaking at their kickoff event and there's like 400 pro-lifers. And there's a former abortion clinic owner who is speaking. So I'm waiting to speak. And the abortion clinic, like, escorts, okay, the volunteers, there's like these 20-something dudes, and they're like pointing at me. And like I kind of walk up behind the stage, and they're like, "Are you Sean Garney?" And it's just one guy in particular. He's really ticked, like the vein and everything. And I go, "Yeah." He's like, "Get out of our state. We don't want you here." All this stuff. And he's just screaming. So I just kind of let him scream and scream and scream. And he's like, which I would have never. He's like, "Where do you live?" It's like, I'm going to give him my home address. Come over sometime. We'll have coffee. I said, "Houston." This is after he chews me out. I said, "I live in Houston, but I grew up in East Texas, so I'm a Cowboys fan. I don't like the Texans." And he's like, "I love the Cowboys." And I was like, "What?" Like, I was so taken aback. And I was like, "Oh, cool, man." And I just thought, hey, the wall went down. And so I turned because I'm like, I don't want to get into a dialogue. And so I turned to the back of the stage to act like I'm just watching the speeches and try to ignore him because I was like, okay, he's a Cowboy fan. Maybe I'm human. We'll sit there. And I hear this, what are they going to do with Zeke? This is a couple years ago. Like before they were going to sign Zeke Elliott, the Cowboy running back, they were going to sign him. And it was a big deal. Like, they have to spend a lot of money, or is he getting too old, or should they cut him? They ended up signing him, which they shouldn't have. So he's like, what do you think they're going to do with Zeke? And I was like, I think they should cut him. They don't need him. He's getting old. He's like, I think that too. And none of these people understand. We were just talking about it yesterday. He points to the other escorts. And they're like, hey, he thinks we should cut Zeke. Like, and all this is going on during the rally. I'm like, you were just yelling at me. Like, we're seconds.
What would have been great is if a woman would have said, no uterus, no opinion.
Yeah. Or like, sign Zeke. So then, like, we went through the whole thing. Like, he loved Jerry Jones. I love Jerry Jones. We went through, like, the 90s Cowboys and all this stuff. And he was totally fine. But I mean, this guy, he had the vein coming out. And I know for better or for worse, it's maybe the power of everyday conversation or the power of, sports or weather or travel or whatever you can, movies, whatever you can do to like icebreaker. But I give my talk. And it's like, this is going to be abortion free. And it was the cotton candy because it was pink. It looked like a corporate cotton candy headquarters, but it was an abortion facility. I'm like, this isn't legitimate healthcare. It looks like Pink Panther lives here. So, we went through the whole thing. And, I talked to people and we're hanging out and I run back to my rental car and he's like, we open with New York on September 9th or whatever. I'm like, are we friends? Like, what just happened here?
You just made a new best friend.
It was so funny. And I went home and told Mary Lisa, she's like rolling about it. But I just thought, that's that's what people don't understand, is that somebody can think they're really wound up about something, and you can think like you're public enemy number one. This is what's so horrible about social media or Twitter or TikTok, is it's just like, you're a piece of, and they have no disdain. We see it with politicians. We see it for all this. And then people say, no, I ran into whatever, some celebrity. They're like, oh, he's a pretty nice guy. Or I ran into, I was in a green room with Chelsea Clinton. I think I told you about that, and she was as nice as can be. And, but I was sitting there going, I'm just sorry for what's happened to you, But it's just one of those where there has to be an initial, and it is a good what to say when tactic to get them off we got to get out of here. You're either going to scream at me and just keep cussing, or we have to kind of pivot, and then maybe we'll circle back. Maybe we won't. In this case, we didn't. We didn't come back, and he's like, now I'm pro-life because you want to cut Zeke. It was just...
You tell him Michael Irvin's pro-life?
Yeah, I should have. I think I did, actually.
Moose Johnston?
I think I did. I did mention Irvin. I said, Michael Irvin gives pro-life talks. Like, he does. It's like he was the oldest of 11. He still eats his cereal with water because he was too poor to have milk as a kid, and it reminds him where he came from. He's like, that's awesome. See, it was all stuff like that. Like, we're totally in because it's like 20 minutes sitting there talking. But he was like screaming at me for the first 5 minutes.
The low-key part of this that I really like is that this guy had clearly done his homework to know your name, that you were coming, why it mattered, and didn't know what you looked like. Like, he couldn't find a picture on the internet when he
No. He pointed at me and he said, you're Sean Kearney.
Oh, I thought he was asking. Okay.
He was just confirming.
Yeah, it was a confirmation. And I saw, like, across the street when I got there, I saw them, like, looking at me and pointing. And I was like, and I knew I'd been there before. I was like, oh, they're pro-abortion folks. They're kind of crazy here. And so we had done all that. And I did the full-blown, this was the head, the deep part of the deep South, the epitome of a slave state, and here you are, you're going to be the one that liberates the unborn. And I mean, I remember the clinic worker was like, like she did that, which is always great when you get one of those. But it was kind of a edgy talk, I remember, because the rallies and you're all fired up, and then he's like, we'll see you next season, bro.
This is a very important year for me to hear this story, because next time I go out, I mean, abortion has been illegal in Wisconsin for a year now. It's probably going to change. Things are going to get hot and heated. What better year for that to be the case than the year that Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets? I already know how to handle it.
Steve is going to, are you pro Aaron Rodgers leaving, or, do you want him to be here? Yeah, that was definitely one of my more comical, 180s, but it just shows too, people, I hope, and I know this is naive, but people do have an ability to get over themselves. Otherwise, there would be no conversions to Christianity. There'd be no hope. We would just all be stuck, And people get on kicks all the time. It could be a health kick. It could be whatever. Who knows? But we do have the ability to step back and be like, okay, maybe I'm not as wound up as I think that I am. So it's great. And it can happen to you at any point. And that's why we talk about in the book, the uncle at Thanksgiving, the crazy person at work, all of these scenarios. You have to endure it. You have to endure it. To use yet another Rocky analogy, since Steve hasn't seen any of them, that's what Rocky does. He takes the beating. In the end, he wins.
Boom.
Just trying to do my best here. So, okay. Please also, I have some housekeeping items. If you do not receive Day 41 magazine, because I think we referenced that earlier, go to 40daysforlife.com/magazine and sign up for the magazine. Also, it is free. It comes out quarterly. Everybody's told us it's fantastic. We think it's fantastic. And we have a lot of these in-depth interviews and also apologetics tips in the magazine. So be sure to get a Day 41 magazine and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have mentioned a couple of times that we have had our 1 millionth download. A lot of that is due to this podcast not only being audio, but video, and our numbers just continue to go up every month compared to last year. So thank you for tuning in. Send us your good and bad feedback. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Heather. Please rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.